Hey friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Welcome back to my craft room for another pretty pink Posh video. And I'm going to be creating a really simple fall themed card. I'm going to use the Fall Icon stamp set, the coordinating dies, and the layered leaf lattice stencil set for today's card. I'm going to start with my stenciling, so I'm going to grab a piece of white cardstock trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm just going to do my best to get it centered behind the A stencil. I'll use my repositionable tape to attach the cardstock to the stencil, and then once I know that the paper won't move, I'll go ahead and flip it over, and I'm going to start with brown ink. I'm using Distress ink in Vintage Photo and a blending brush. I'm going to add the ink completely over the stencil, doing my best to make sure I get enough ink through the pretty design. And once I'm happy with how much ink I do have, I'll go ahead and pull off the first stencil, leaving that tape on the back side of my white cardstock. Next, I'll line up the B stencil, making sure those leaves are at the intersection of all of the dashed lines from the A stencil. And I'm going to use a red ink this time. This is Candied Apple Distress ink. I have another blending brush that I'm using to fully add in all of the red ink through those leaf stencils. I think red and brown are just kind of a classic fall color combo, so that's why I chose those colors for my background. I'll go ahead and clean off my stencils and clean my desk and put the stencils away while I move on to getting my fall icons ready. I know that I want to use the largest, more scallop looking die to die cut a bunch of craft cardstock circles, and I'm going to use the smaller of the two circles to cut out all of my images. Now the fall icons coordinating dies have a lot of options, so we have the scallop circle, a larger solid circle, a smaller circle, or you can use the coordinating dies for all of those images. I love that there's different ways you can cut out the different icons from this stamp set. So I was going to go with 6 icons, so I cut out 6 scallop circles out of some brown craft cardstock, and I'm going to have to narrow down which 6 icons I want to use. All of them will fit in the smaller circle, so again I'm going to use that smaller circle size so I have enough of that craft cardstock peeking out from behind the circle. So I opened up my stamp set and I narrowed down the icons I wanted to use to the leaf. I want to use the cute little scarecrow face, the turkey. I'm going to use the gourd and the flower, and finally I decide on the pumpkin. So once I have all 6 of those picked out, you can see here it took me a long time to decide on which 6 icon I wanted to use. I'll go ahead and get my Misty ready, and I'm going to stamp in an alcohol marker friendly brown ink. Now I really like a bold dark color for my stamped images, so while I am going to stamp with a lighter brown, I'm not going to take my stamps out of my Misty because I'm going to stamp them again once I'm all done using my alcohol markers to stamp with a VersaFine Clair ink. Now VersaFine Clair is not alcohol marker friendly, so that's why I'm going to use a different brand, and I'm going to use it's a little lighter than I want, so I'm just going to use that light one to do my coloring and then go back over with the VersaFine Clair. If you haven't done this before, it's best to use with a repositionable like stamp tool, or I guess not repositionable, but a stamp tool that you can stamp multiple times and your paper doesn't move. That's more what I mean. So if you have one of those tools, this is the best way to do that technique. So for all of the yellows on my card, I'm using Olo markers, YO 2.5 as the darker color and 2.3 as the lighter color. So this is going to be my sunflower and my gourd, as well as my scarecrow's straw hair and the detail on his hat. So that's all of the yellows on the card. For the browns, I'm going to use OR 3.8 and 3.9 to be the center of my sunflower, and that's the darkest brown color combination. For the lightest brown combination, which will be my scarecrow's face, I am using OR 3.4 and 3.2 to color in, again, just the face part of the scarecrow. I'm going to use a combination of those two colors for my turkey. So I'm going to start with OR 3.7, and that will be the darker tone of my turkey's little face. And then I'll bring in OR 3.4 to be the lighter color. So I'm only doing 2 tones for all of these images. They're so tiny. You could even just do 1 if you really wanted to. For the wattle of the turkey, I use R0.5, and it's also going to be the darker shade for all of the red on the card, which will be my leaf, as well as some of the feathers on my turkey. I'm also going to use the lighter shade to color in the nose of my scarecrow. After the reds, I'll move on to the orange, which is going to be O2.4 as the darker color and O2.2 as the lighter, and that will be my pumpkin as well as the orange feathers of my turkey. I'm going to use that darker shade to also color in the beak of the turkey. For my greens, this will be the leaf of my gourd as well as my scarecrow's hat. I'm using YG 8.5 as the darker color and YG 8.3 as the lighter. Once I'm all done with my coloring, I'm going to zoom back out. I just wanted you to see the tops of my markers if you also use Olo markers, and see if you could get any tips from how I color. I'm going to put my paper back into my MISTI, the same lower corner, and this time again I'm bringing out my VersaFine Clair in Pinecone ink, and I'm adding ink to my images and stamping right on top of what I colored. And I know that can be kind of scary because you have to make sure your paper is in the same spot, but I just love having that dark, bold, crisp line around my images. So that's one way you can create that deeper line if you don't have it in an alcohol marker friendly ink. I'm going to use my white gel pen to clean up anywhere where I went out of the lines on my images. You could also use it to add cute little cheeks to the turkey and scarecrow or some highlights to the images, but I went ahead and just left them as is. I'm going to grab that smaller circle die and die cut out all of those icons off camera, and then we can start layering them onto the craft cardstock scallop circles. So I really have no preference yet on where I'm going to put these icons, so I'm just going to glue them to the craft circles just one at a time using tape runner and gluing them to the center. Once I have all of them glued down, I'm going to check my spacing and make sure I'm happy with how they look. And I wanted this panel to be a little smaller. A2 was just a bit too big. Now I worked really hard to get my stencil design centered, so I'm going to cut off 1/4 inch from all 4 sides. If you don't care about it being centered, or maybe it's not perfectly centered to begin with, you could cut off 1/2 inch off the top and off the bottom. But again, I wanted it to look centered, so I did 1/4 inch. Next, I cut a brown cardstock, the same craft cardstock that I used when I was die cutting the scallop circles, to 4 by 5 1/4, what I had originally planned for my stenciled background, and an A2 card base. I have a top folding card base out of some sturdy white cardstock. I'm adding some adhesive runner to the back of the craft, and I'll go ahead and adhere that to the center of my card base. Then I'm going to add the same adhesive to the back of my stenciled panel and glue that to the center of the cardstock, so there is a border between my stenciled background and the white cardstock, just to break up some of that white. Now I'm going to figure out the design and order that I want all of my images. I kind of didn't want the faces to be next to each other. I didn't want the gourds to be next to each other. I didn't want the yellows to be next to each other. So I played around to try to break up the colors and have it flow in different fun ways around the card. I'm using some 2mm foam adhesive, and I'm going to add them to the back of all of the circles and just start placing them onto the background, doing my best to keep them evenly spaced. I'm going to start with the bottom, making sure to do my best again to create the same amount of space on the left that there is on the right. And when I glue the top ones, do my best to keep them spaced the same. You could definitely use a ruler to help you, but I just freehanded all the different icons onto my background. Here's how my card turned out. I hope you enjoyed this fun process for this quick and easy Thanksgiving or fall themed card. You could definitely change it up by mixing up the colors or changing out the icons, but I hope it brought you some inspiration today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!